You're walking your dog in your own neighborhood. A pit bull breaks through a fence, and within seconds, your life changes forever. Or maybe you're visiting a friend's house when their friendly dog suddenly lunges at your face. What happens next isn't just about physical scars. It's about a legal battle that could take years, medical bills that pile up into the hundreds of thousands, and a compensation system that most people don't understand until it's too late. Before we dive into some of the most shocking animal attack cases and what they reveal about your rights, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, the information we're about to cover could literally save you or someone you love from making devastating mistakes after an animal attack. And turn on notifications because we're covering stories the mainstream media won't touch. Here's what nobody tells you about animal attacks in America. Every year, over 4.5 million people get bitten by dogs alone. That's not counting attacks by other animals. Out of those millions of bites, around 800,000 require medical attention serious enough to send someone to the emergency room. But here's the kicker. Only a tiny fraction of victims ever see meaningful compensation. And the ones who do, they often wait years fighting insurance companies, navigating complex laws, and dealing with defense attorneys who will say anything to minimize what happened to them. Let me tell you about a case that perfectly illustrates this. A woman in California was walking through her neighborhood when two pit bulls attacked her completely unprovoked. These weren't strays. They belonged to someone in the area. The attack was vicious. We're talking about massive injuries that required immediate emergency intervention. The kind of trauma that doesn't just heal with a few stitches and some antibiotics. This woman ended up in the hospital facing surgery after surgery. Her medical bills climbed past $300,000. $300,000. And that's just the medical costs. That doesn't count lost wages, the psychological trauma, the permanent scarring, or the fact that her life would never be the same. She couldn't work. She developed severe anxiety around dogs. Simple activities like walking outside became sources of terror. Her attorney fought the case and ultimately secured a settlement of $2 million. $2 million sounds like a lot, right? But let's break down what that actually means. After legal fees, after paying back medical providers who had liens on the case, after covering all the expenses that accumulated during years of litigation, what she actually walked away with was significantly less. And even that amount doesn't truly compensate for the permanent changes to her quality of life. But here's what makes this case so important. The insurance company didn't just hand over $2 million because they felt bad. They fought every single step. They tried to argue the woman provoked the dogs. They brought in experts to downplay her injuries. They delayed and delayed, hoping she'd give up or accept a low-ball offer. This is standard procedure. And if she hadn't had experienced legal representation, she probably would have settled for a fraction of what she deserved. Now, let's talk about another case that shows a different side of this issue. A gentleman was visiting someone's property when their dog attacked him. Not a stranger's dog. Not a dog running loose in public. A dog that belonged to someone he knew on their property. The attack caused serious injuries that required extensive medical treatment. His case settled for $1,250,000. Think about what this means. When you visit someone's house, you assume a certain level of safety. You don't expect their pet to maul you. But legally, property owners have a responsibility to control their animals. If they know their dog has aggressive tendencies, if they've seen warning signs, if the dog is bitten before, they have a duty to protect visitors. When they fail in that duty, they're liable. But proving that liability? That's where things get complicated. Insurance companies love to use something called comparative negligence. They'll argue that the victim somehow contributed to their own injuries. Maybe they startled the dog. Maybe they ignored warning signs. Maybe they entered an area they shouldn't have. Even if these arguments are complete nonsense, they can reduce the compensation a victim receives. In some states, if you're found even 1% responsible for your injuries, your compensation gets reduced by that percentage. In other states, if you're more than 50% responsible, you get nothing at all. Here's another case that'll make your blood boil. A young person was attacked by a dog and suffered injuries serious enough to require significant medical intervention. The settlement? $1,100,000. Now you might be thinking, these settlements are all in the millions. That must mean the system works, right? Wrong. For every case that settles for 7 figures, there are hundreds that settle for pennies on the dollar or don't settle at all. The cases that result in million-dollar settlements usually involve some combination of the following factors. Severe permanent injuries. Clear liability, where the dog owner was obviously negligent. Insurance policies with high enough limits to actually pay out meaningful amounts. And perhaps most importantly, attorneys who know how to fight insurance companies and won't back down. Let me give you some context about how insurance works in these cases. When a dog bites someone, the claim typically goes through the dog owner's homeowner's insurance or renter's insurance. Most policies have liability coverage ranging from $100,000 to $500,000. Some people have umbrella policies that provide additional coverage up to several $1,000,000. But here's the dirty secret. Insurance companies are businesses. Their profit depends on paying out as little as possible. So even when you have a clear case and serious injuries, they'll still try to minimize your claim. They start by questioning whether their policyholder is really at fault. Did the victim trespass? Did they provoke the dog? Was the dog acting in self-defense? Then they'll question the severity of injuries. Are all those medical treatments really necessary? Is the victim exaggerating their pain? Are they really unable to work? And finally, they'll question the value of the claim. Even if they admit their policyholder is at fault and the injuries are real, they'll argue the compensation should be much lower than what you're asking for. Let's look at another case. A person was attacked by an animal and suffered injuries that required immediate medical attention and ongoing treatment. The settlement came in at $900,000. Again, substantial money. But consider what it takes to reach that point. First, you need medical documentation of everything. Every emergency room visit, every surgery, every therapy session, every medication. You need expert testimony about the long-term prognosis. Will these injuries cause permanent disability? Will there be ongoing medical needs? What's the likelihood of future complications? Then you need documentation of economic damages. How much work have you missed? What's your earning capacity before versus after the attack? If you can't return to your previous job, what are the implications for your lifetime earnings? For younger victims, we're talking about potentially millions of dollars in lost future income. And then there's the non-economic damages. Pain and suffering, emotional distress, loss of enjoyment of life. How do you put a dollar value on never feeling safe around animals again? How do you quantify the psychological trauma of a violent attack? Different states have different rules about how these damages are calculated, and insurance companies will fight every dollar. There was a case involving a dog attack that settled for $850,000. The victim suffered serious injuries that required multiple medical interventions. What stands out about this case is that it shows even when you have a solid claim, the settlement amount depends heavily on the insurance policy limits available. If the dog owner only had a $200,000 policy, guess what the maximum recovery would be? $200,000, regardless of how severe the injuries were. This is why many animal attack cases end up going after multiple sources of potential compensation. The dog owner's homeowner's insurance, their personal assets if they have any, potentially the landlord if the attack happened on rental property, and the landlord knew about the dangerous dog. Here's something most people don't realize. In some states, there are strict liability laws for dog bites. This means the owner is automatically responsible if their dog bites someone, regardless of whether the dog had ever shown aggression before. California, for example, has strict liability. If a dog bites you in California, the owner is liable. Period. They can't argue, "Oh, my dog has never bitten anyone before," as a defense. But other states use what's called the one-bite rule. In these states, a dog owner is only liable if they knew or should have known their dog was dangerous. So if it's the dog's first bite, the owner might not be held responsible. This is insane when you think about it. It means the first victim gets no compensation, but the second victim does. The laws vary wildly from state to state, and this can dramatically impact your case. There was another settlement for $700,000 in a dog attack case. $700,000 represents serious money, but it also represents serious injuries. We're talking about attacks that leave permanent scars that require reconstructive surgery that cause nerve damage and chronic pain. Some victims lose function in their hands or limbs. Some develop infections that require additional hospitalizations. The initial attack is just the beginning of a long medical journey. And let's talk about children for a moment. Kids are disproportionately affected by dog attacks. They're smaller, so they're more vulnerable to serious injury. They often don't recognize warning signs that a dog is about to attack. And the psychological impact on a child can be profound and long-lasting. A child who gets mauled by a dog might develop lifelong anxiety disorders, phobias, and PTSD. How do you compensate for that? How do you put a price on a childhood stolen by trauma? There was a case that settled for $600,000. Again, substantial compensation, but earned through extensive litigation and negotiation. Here's what the process typically looks like. First, you get attacked. You seek immediate medical treatment. You report the attack to animal control and possibly the police. You document everything with photos of your injuries, photos of the scene, and witness statements if anyone saw what happened. Then you find an attorney who specializes in animal attack cases. Not just any personal injury attorney. You want someone who specifically handles these cases because they understand the unique issues involved. Your attorney investigates the case, gathers evidence, and identifies all potential sources of compensation. They send a demand letter to the insurance company outlining the facts of the case and the compensation you're seeking. The insurance company responds, usually with a lowball offer. We're talking about offers that don't even cover your medical bills, let alone your other damages. Your attorney rejects the offer and begins negotiating. If negotiations fail, your attorney files a lawsuit. This is where things get expensive for the insurance company because now they have to pay their own attorneys to defend the case. Discovery begins, which means both sides exchange information, take depositions, and gather evidence. This can take months or even years. Eventually, most cases settle before trial because trials are risky for both sides. The victim risks getting nothing if a jury sides with the defendant. The insurance company risks a massive verdict if the jury sympathizes with the victim. So they negotiate a settlement somewhere in between. But getting to that settlement requires persistence, legal expertise, and often a willingness to go to trial if necessary. One case resulted in a $575,000 settlement. What's important to understand is that these settlement amounts aren't arbitrary. They're based on specific calculations of economic damages, medical expenses, lost income, and non-economic damages like pain and suffering. Insurance companies have formulas they use to value claims, but these formulas are designed to minimize payouts. Your attorney's job is to show why your case is worth more than their formula suggests. Let me tell you about a case that settled for $500,000. $500,000. That might seem like winning the lottery to some people, but consider what it takes to get there. You've been permanently injured by someone else's animal. You've been through surgeries, physical therapy, psychological counseling. You've missed work for weeks or months. You've got medical bills that would bankrupt most families. You've got scars that will never go away. And you've spent years fighting with insurance companies who treated you like you were trying to scam them. Is $500,000 really too much compensation for that? The insurance companies certainly think so. They'll fight to pay you as little as possible, and they have way more resources than you do. They have teams of attorneys, investigators, and experts. They can afford to drag the case out for years because delay costs them nothing, but costs you everything. Another case settled for $475,000. These cases all share common elements: serious injuries, clear liability, and experienced legal representation. You know what doesn't result in settlements like this? Trying to handle the case yourself, accepting the insurance company's first offer, thinking it's just a dog bite, and not taking it seriously. The victims who recover meaningful compensation are the ones who understand they're up against a system designed to minimize their claims and to get professional help to fight back. There was a settlement for $450,000 in another dog attack case. What I want you to understand is that these numbers represent the ceiling, not the floor. These are the successful cases. For every settlement in the hundreds of thousands, there are cases that settle for $10,000 or $20,000, or $5,000, or nothing at all. The difference isn't always the severity of injuries. Sometimes it's the quality of legal representation. Sometimes it's the jurisdiction where the case is filed. Sometimes it's just luck in terms of what judge or jury you get. Here's another critical issue: dangerous dog breeds. Now, before anyone comes at me in the comments, I'm not saying certain breeds are inherently evil. But statistics don't lie. Pit bulls are involved in a disproportionate number of serious and fatal attacks. According to data, pit bulls are responsible for over 60% of dog bite fatalities, despite representing a much smaller percentage of the dog population. German Shepherds, Rottweilers, and other large breeds are also frequently involved in serious attacks. Does this mean we should ban these breeds? That's a whole political debate. But what's not debatable is that owners of potentially dangerous dogs have a heightened responsibility to control their animals. If you own a pit bull or a Rottweiler, you need to be extra cautious. You need proper training. You need secure fencing. You need to supervise interactions with strangers and children. And you need adequate insurance coverage, because if your dog attacks someone, you could be looking at a massive lawsuit. One case involving a dog attack settled for $425,000. Let's talk about what happens when the dog owner doesn't have insurance or doesn't have enough insurance. This is where things get really complicated. If the dog owner has no insurance and no assets, you might win your case, but never collect a dollar. You can get a judgment for $1 million, but if the defendant has nothing, you can't squeeze blood from a stone. Some attorneys work on a contingency fee basis for these cases, meaning they only get paid if you recover compensation. But if they investigate and determine the defendant has no insurance and no assets, they might not take the case at all. It's harsh, but it's reality. Attorneys can't work for free, and they can't afford to invest thousands of dollars in a case that has no chance of recovery. This is why some victims end up using their own health insurance to cover medical bills and just eating the loss. It's completely unfair, but it's how the system works. The person who did nothing wrong suffers, while the person who owned a dangerous dog faces no real consequences beyond potentially losing their dog. There was another settlement for $400,000. Let's talk about the timeline for these cases. From the date of the attack to the date you receive your settlement check, you're typically looking at 1 to 3 years. Sometimes longer if the case goes to trial. During that time, your medical bills are piling up. Your creditors might be calling. You might be out of work. The stress is enormous. Some medical providers will agree to treat you on a lien, meaning they provide treatment now and get paid later out of your settlement. But not all providers do this, and those that do often charge higher rates because they're taking on risk. So you might end up with medical bills that are inflated because you couldn't pay up front. And here's something that'll really make you mad. The insurance company knows you're desperate. They know you need money for bills. They know you're stressed and scared. So they use that against you. They make a low-ball offer and suggest you take it now rather than wait years for a trial. They're banking on you being desperate enough to accept way less than your case is worth. A case settled for $375,000. $375,000 is more than most people make in years of work. But remember, this is compensation for permanent injuries, for ongoing medical needs, for psychological trauma, for lost earning capacity. When you break it down, it's not excessive. It's just making the victim as whole as possible under the circumstances. Another case resulted in a $350,000 settlement. Let's talk about the types of injuries we're seeing in these cases. We're talking about lacerations that require dozens or even hundreds of stitches. We're talking about nerve damage that causes permanent loss of sensation or function. We're talking about broken bones, particularly in facial attack cases. We're talking about infections that can become life-threatening if not properly treated. We're also talking about disfigurement. Facial scars that no amount of plastic surgery can completely fix. Missing chunks of ears, noses, lips. Permanent disability in hands or arms. Some victims lose eyes. Some lose fingers. These aren't minor injuries that heal completely. These are injuries that change someone's appearance and function for the rest of their lives. There was a settlement for $325,000 in another attack case. Psychological injuries are just as real as physical ones, but they're harder to prove. How do you show a jury that you have PTSD, that you have panic attacks, that you can't sleep without nightmares, that you can't be around dogs anymore without having a breakdown? You need expert testimony from psychologists and psychiatrists. You need documentation of treatment. You need witnesses who can testify about how your personality and behavior have changed since the attack. This all costs money and takes time, and insurance companies will still try to argue you're exaggerating or that your problems aren't related to the attack. One case settled for $300,000. $300,000 represents a significant recovery, but it's still within the range of what many homeowners' insurance policies cover. This is important because it shows you don't need a millionaire dog owner to have a viable case. As long as they have insurance, there's potential for recovery. But here's the catch. Some insurance policies have exclusions for certain breeds. If you own a pit bull or Rottweiler, some insurance companies won't cover you at all. Others will exclude coverage for dog bites. So even if the dog owner has homeowner's insurance, it might not cover your claim. This is why proper investigation is crucial. Your attorney needs to determine not just whether insurance exists, but whether it actually covers this specific type of claim. Another case resulted in a $275,000 settlement. Let's address something important. What if the attack happened at a place of business? Let's say you're at a pet store and another customer's dog attacks you. Or you're staying at a hotel that allows dogs and you get attacked in the hallway. Or you're at a restaurant with outdoor seating and a dog at another table bites you. In these situations, you might have claims against multiple parties. The dog owner, obviously. but potentially also the business for failing to provide a safe environment. Do they have policies about controlling animals on their property? Do they enforce those policies? If a business knows that allowing dogs creates risks and they don't take adequate precautions, they can be liable too. There was a settlement for $250,000, $250,000. For someone working a minimum wage job, that's over 20 years of earnings. But for someone who suffers permanent disability and can't work anymore, it might not even cover their lifetime economic losses. This is why it's so important to properly calculate all damages, both current and future. Your attorney should work with economists and life care planners to project your future needs. If you're going to need ongoing medical treatment for the rest of your life, what's the present value of those future medical costs? If you can't return to your previous career, what's the difference between what you would have earned and what you can earn now? These calculations can add hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars to your claim. One case settled for $225,000. Here's a question I get a lot. What about attacks by animals other than dogs? We're talking about exotic pets, farm animals, wild animals. The legal principles are similar, but the details vary. If someone keeps a tiger or a bear as a pet, and it attacks you, they're almost certainly liable because keeping such dangerous animals creates obvious risks. Farm animal attacks are trickier. If you're trespassing on a farm and a bull charges you, you might not have a case. But if you're lawfully on the property, and the owner knows they have an aggressive animal and doesn't warn you, they could be liable. Wild animal attacks are usually not anyone's fault unless someone did something to create the dangerous situation. There was another settlement for $200,000. $200,000 is right around the minimum policy limits for many homeowners' insurance policies. This shows that even relatively small cases can max out insurance coverage. And once you hit policy limits, there's often nowhere else to go unless the defendant has significant personal assets. This is why I keep emphasizing the importance of proper investigation. Your attorney needs to know what insurance coverage exists, whether there are multiple policies that might apply, whether there are other potentially liable parties, and whether the defendant has assets worth pursuing. All of this investigation costs money, which is why experienced animal attack attorneys are so valuable. They know what to look for and how to maximize recovery. Let me hit you with some statistics that'll blow your mind. The average cost of a dog bite claim, according to insurance industry data, is around $64,000. That's the average. That includes minor bites that just need a few stitches and catastrophic attacks that cause permanent disability. But here's what's crazy. The number of claims has been going down slightly, but the average cost per claim keeps going up. Why? Medical costs are increasing. Juries are awarding larger verdicts, and people are more aware of their rights. But $64,000 is still way less than the settlements we've been discussing. Why? Because the $64,000 average includes tons of cases that settle quickly for small amounts. The cases that go to experienced attorneys and get properly litigated settle for much more. This is the difference between accepting the insurance company's first offer and fighting for what you actually deserve. Here's what you need to know if you or someone you love gets attacked by an animal. First, seek immediate medical attention. Even if the bite seems minor, you need professional evaluation. Bites can cause infections, including rabies. They can damage underlying tissues that aren't visible from the outside. And having immediate medical documentation is crucial for any legal case. Second, report the attack to animal control and the police. Get an official report on file. This creates a paper trail and might reveal information about the dog, like previous attacks or complaints. Third, document everything. Take photos of your injuries. Take photos of the scene. Get contact information from any witnesses. Write down everything you remember about the attack while it's fresh in your memory. Fourth, do not talk to the dog owner's insurance company without an attorney. I can't stress this enough. The insurance adjuster is not your friend. They're trained to get you to say things that hurt your case. They might try to get you to give a recorded statement. They might try to get you to sign a medical release. Don't do it. Politely tell them you're consulting with an attorney and end the conversation. Fifth, consult with an attorney who specializes in animal attack cases. Most offer free consultations. They'll evaluate your case, explain your rights, and let you know whether you have a viable claim. If they take your case on contingency, you pay nothing up front and only pay if you recover compensation. Look, I know this has been a heavy topic. Animal attacks are traumatic, painful, and life-changing. But here's what I want you to take away from this. If you or someone you love becomes a victim, you have rights. You deserve compensation for your injuries. And there are attorneys who know how to fight the insurance companies and get you what you deserve. Don't let the insurance company take advantage of you. Don't settle for pennies when your case is worth hundreds of thousands or millions. Don't let them pressure you into accepting a lowball offer. And don't think you can handle this alone. These cases are too complex and insurance companies have too many advantages. If this video helped you understand your rights after an animal attack, smash that like button and share this with anyone who might need this information. Subscribe to the channel because we're going to keep covering legal topics that affect real people's lives. And drop a comment if you have questions or if you've been through an animal attack case yourself. I read every comment, and your stories might help other people going through the same thing. The settlements we discussed today, ranging from $200,000 all the way up to $2 million, show that justice is possible. But it's not automatic. It requires knowledge, persistence, and experienced legal representation. Don't be another statistic. Don't be another victim who gets taken advantage of by the insurance system. Stand up for your rights and get the compensation you deserve. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll dive into even more legal topics that everyone needs to know about. Stay safe out there.